Pardon the interruption. I am Sam Mulberry, and I am joined by,
Chris Garretts.
and this is our sort of kickoff to the fall 2020 semester of Christianity and Western Culture,
I thought
GES
you were going to say
130.
season for a second, but I'm just really desperate for sports at this point.
Yeah, we can call it a season. We can call it a semester. Fall is a season. So we're here to introduce you to Christianity, Western Culture, CWC, to help you learn a little bit more about this course, what this semester is going to look like. This is a course that's been taught for about 35 years at Bethel, but this is going to be done differently than it ever has been. So we're here to talk about this. Chris and I are the two coordinators for the course. We're on a team of 9 faculty who you'll meet throughout the first couple of weeks of the semester. You'll meet the faculty members. But to start off with, Chris, can you just tell us like what is CWC? What is this course? Why do students at Bethel have to take it?
Sure. So CWC is Christianity and Western Culture. So the way I think about it is this is like a Western Civ course. I took one of these in college. And it covers roughly like ancient Greece, so 500 BC or BC. And we basically stop around 1800, although the last 2 weeks of the class would kind of bring things into the 20th century a little bit. So it's a Western Civ kind of structure, which means we cover a lot of history, but what really makes it distinctive is that we're also doing church history. We're telling the story of Christianity in relation to one culture, certainly not the only culture that matters in the Christian story, but one of them. In the process, we're also introducing the liberal arts, is how I think about it. You're going to meet philosophers and theologians and different kinds of historians. In other semesters, we have political scientists and other kinds of scholars on the team. And so it's partly to introduce you to kind of the big questions that we ask at a school like Bethel, at a Christian liberal arts college. And so you're going to hear a lot about this starting on day 1 in class. One of us will be up there talking about questions like, who am I and who should I be? Which is a question that's fairly universal, right? It's not just something Christians ask. And so you're also going to hear non-Christian answers, starting with ancient Greek philosophers. We'll hear Muslim answers to that, and then we'll hear some Enlightenment thinkers who are starting to break with Christianity. We'll think about what we owe to other people, what our responsibility to others is like. We'll think about how Christians relate to culture. In some ways, this is really the goal of the class. It's not so much that we want you to love Western culture, like we want you to see the problems of Western culture, especially this semester, racism. But it's hard to kind of realize you're living in the middle of a culture. And so this is to help train you to step back and observe things that you might have taken for granted, think about where they came from, to critique them, to celebrate them, and to think about, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, how you live in the midst of that culture. And then the final big question, what our philosophers and theologians especially like, is how do you even answer those questions? Right? Instead of just kind of repeating answers you've heard from parents or from friends or pastors or teachers or us, how do you answer them for yourself? How do you come to a better sort of understanding of who I am and who I should be and all those things? So we'll say more about other things that this does and how it relates to the Gen Ed curriculum at Bethel, but that's my best shot at explaining in 2 or 3 minutes what it is. Sam, you've been part of this class longer than anyone else. Is there anything else you would add to that that's especially important?
I really do think it's a good foundation. Most students taking this course are in their first year at Bethel. It's a good introduction to Bethel. It's also a prereq for a lot of other gen eds you're going to take here. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is also setting the table for some of the big questions you're not just going to ask in this course, but you're going to ask throughout your Bethel career.
So speaking of what we're going to be doing, Sam, can you just tell us a little bit about what students should expect to be doing in the class? It'll be unique. We'll get to that in a second, but what are kind of the key components of CWC?
It's a great question because if you've looked at your schedule, you notice that there's 2 different times set aside for CWC. One of them is our lecture time, which is the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class period. So you should be in one lecture section. And in lecture, what we'll do is we'll have, like I said, we have a team of 9 faculty. So different people will be lecturing each time. And when those 9 faculty are all coming from different departments as well. So Chris and I both teach in the history department, but we're going to have philosophers and theologians, Bible scholars, people coming from lots of different fields to talk about this stuff. And so in lecture, what we're going to be seeing is kind of the big overarching story. We're going to be introducing the big ideas. We're going to be weaving a historical narrative from the ancient Greeks up through 1800 or so. And that's going to be the main function of lecture, right? To kind of give you that story, give you some of those big ideas, introduce you to some of the people we're going to be reading from, whose ideas we're going to be really diving into. So in most weeks, lectures will be Monday and Friday. If you look on Moodle, you can see the schedule for the course. There's occasions when we'll use that Wednesday time. I think there's 3 times in the semester when we'll have a Wednesday lecture, but usually it'll be Monday and Friday lectures. And then on your schedule, you notice you also have a small group time, which is listed as either on Wednesday or Thursday. And CWC is a course that lots of students take. We have around 300 students in CWC this semester. So that can be a big class, and Bethel's a place where we don't want to just, dump you into a big lecture hall all the time. We want to create a small group of people that you can study with, learn with, ask questions. So each of you is also enrolled in a small group which has 17 students in it. So 1 professor and 17 students, and that meets once a week. And in small group, what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to dig deeper. So we're going to use that as a chance to have discussions. Really, it's a chance for you to ask questions. So you should always come to small group with questions, things you want to work on. I think about small group as a chance to take all of the stuff that we're studying and sort of piece it all together. To not just think about, I need to know this, and I need to know this, and I need to know this, but think about, how do those pieces connect? How do these different folks that we're studying, how do they talk to each other? How do they answer these questions differently? So how can we see this as a historical conversation? So that's what we're going to be doing a lot in small group. The course will have 3 exams. Those will be online. Every week, students will have a quiz, which will also be online. And I would say the other big component of the course is this book right here, which is our CWC reading packet. This is our primary source reader. So this is where, when we talk about all these folks that we're going to be studying this semester, this is where we get to actually read their words. So this is going to be an important tool for you as you're going through this course, as you're exploring it. And this is where a lot of our discussion is going to come out of. Chris, we talked about how this is a course that has a long history. I took it when I was a freshman in the fall of 1995. At that point, the course was about 10 years old. Now we are 25 years later. And we said this is going to be different than any other semester. What's going to be unique about this semester?
So students, you've probably heard a lot about hybrid or high flex or modified face-to-face, and that's going to look different in each class. So, I mean, maybe something we should come back to is we're just going to be patient with each other as we all get used to these different schedules. So in CWC, basically what it means is a few changes. So we've got our typical kind of Monday lecture, Wednesday, Thursday small group, Friday lecture. So the first big change is that you're only going to attend lecture at most half the time. So we've moved everything to what's called the underground, which is a big multi-purpose space next to the campus store. It's big, but with social distancing, even that doesn't seat that many people. So we'll have at most maybe 60 students sitting there listening to one of us give a lecture. So for some of you, that's 9 o'clock. Some of you, it's 11:10. Some of you don't actually have a scheduled time. We'll come back to that in a sec. And so we'll say more about this as we go, and we'll send you an email actually before the first one to let you know whether you're supposed to show up or not, but it depends on whose small group you're in. So certain students will be Mondays and a few Wednesdays, certain will be in class on Fridays. Now in small group, that Wednesday or Thursday time, which is about 50 minutes, that actually is going to be largely as it would be. You will show up to a classroom and you'll be there with probably 16, 17 other students, and we'll do what Sam just talked about in small group. Now, a few of you, if you're in Kearney Darling small groups, you are going to be doing that online and lecture online. You're basically online CWC for the semester. And some others of you, you might occasionally have to go online. But otherwise, the big change is that we're doing all our quizzes and exams online, as Sam mentioned before. So quizzes, you can expect not the first week, but basically just about every other week after that, there will be a 10-point quiz on Moodle, which is our learning management system. Just go to moodle.bethel.edu. Actually, if you're watching this, you've probably already been to Moodle. And kind of week by week, we'll have a schedule. That'll be where you find lots of materials, including your quiz. And so that'll be kind of a mix of like matching true, false, subjective questions, and then probably a short answer, like 2, 3, or 4 point, usually a reading response of some sort. And you have to finish that before the end of the day on Thursday. And then exams will be online too. And we'll say more about that as we get close. There's no reason to worry too much about tests quite yet, but they are a big part of the class. Now, Sam, that's kind of the overview, I think. But you know, this is going to be an unusual semester, and week by week it might change. So let me play the role of a student. Professor Mulberry, what should I do if I can't come to class? You know, I'm not feeling well. Bethel told me not to come. I'm in isolation because my roommate is sick and I've been in contact with him. What should I do if I can't come to class?
Well, that's a great question. Um, I would say one thing that's always helpful whenever you're not going to be in class is send an email to your prof, just so they know. You don't need to get into great detail about why you're not going to be there or what nature of sick you are. But I think that's always helpful. That's just a good general practice. But everything that we're going to be doing in class is going to have an online component to it. So if you can't make it to lecture, maybe you're scheduled to come to lecture on Mondays, it's a Monday and you can't come, we're going to post a video of that lecture by 4 p.m. on the lecture day. So you can just wait and watch that lecture online.
And I should have said, if you're scheduled not to be in the classroom, that's what you'll be doing that Monday or Friday. So all the lectures will be living on Moodle and video is something
Yes.
I should have said before.
Yep. So, and if you attended the lecture and say, I just want to watch that again, it will also be there. So we'll have, so that will be available for small group on Moodle. There will be a link for small group. So every time in the day on Wednesday and Thursday that we have a small group, we will have a Zoom link to a live stream of that small group. So you can actually jump on, you can even interact with that small group. So you can do that live synchronously. Now it may not be with your small group instructor because if we're teaching 3 small groups at 150 on a Wednesday, we're only going to live stream one of those. But you can go and participate in class that way. And if let's say you're sick or incapacitated to a degree where you can't actually do the live stream, we also will have a recording of a small group. So there are other options you'll be able to do, all available on Moodle to access what happened in class on those days. Chris, this is, like we said, this is going to be an interesting semester. Any final thoughts in terms of kind of teaching and learning in the age of COVID?
Yeah, I feel like it's taken me the whole summer to wrap my head around what we're trying to do. In some ways, it would be easier if we were just all online. It would certainly be easier if COVID wasn't here and we were just doing our regular, the thing we've done for 34 years before this. But instead, we're doing something kind of in the middle, and we're even doing it knowing that there's a chance that, like some other colleges, we might have to go back online at some point. So I'd say the first thing that you've probably heard from a lot of people and you experienced high school or college this past spring is we just need to be patient with each other. This is something we should always be working on. I think it's a good thing for Christians to be thinking about as part of their spiritual formation, but how do we be gracious with each other? How do we be kind and gentle and how do we empathize with each other? I mean, as a professor, I feel like I always am wrestling with, I want to have high expectations of students. I want to challenge them, but I also want to support them. And I want to understand that their lives are complicated. And so that's a pretty old Bethel mantra, challenge and support. We really need to take it seriously as professors right now. We need to keep challenging students, but understand there might be other kinds of support that are necessary in the midst of all of this. But by the same token, students, you're going to be patient with us. I know you're paying a lot for this, but we're figuring out how to do something in a way that we're not accustomed to doing. Things can change in the middle of it, and so just be patient. The second thing I'd say then is, we've talked a little bit, we haven't used the word synchronous and asynchronous quite yet, but synchronous is when you're taking something all at the same time, whether it's because you're in a classroom together, or maybe some of you are in the class, some of you are live streaming on Zoom. You're at a certain place and certain time. And then there might be something asynchronous, like you're really too sick to make class and you watch small group recorded later, or it's not your turn to be in the classroom and you watch a video later that afternoon of a lecture. That's asynchronous. But what's really struck me this summer is that we actually always expect Bethel students to be doing a lot of asynchronous work. In almost every syllabus you get at Bethel, you'll see something saying like, for every hour in class, you should expect to spend at least 2 hours working outside of class. And that's certainly in the CWC syllabus. And this is a big change for those of you coming from high school, right? Sam, I've heard you give this advice to first-year students before. Now, you're probably accustomed to spending 2 hours in class and having, for every hour you work outside of class, that ratio has now flipped. Most of your learning is asynchronous, beyond the oversight of professors, your responsibility. In that class, that means things like reviewing lecture notes, working towards an exam, looking through vocabulary. Especially, it means doing reading, looking at those sources in that red packet that Sam held up. And that, I mean, to do that well, like that's not a quick thing. That might take you a little while to read and to reread. It means also just thinking. these are big questions. They should come to you in the midst of other activities. You'll be out for a jog, or you'll be at supper with friends, or maybe you just can't sleep one night because you're thinking so much about this question of who am I and who should I be? That's all part of the learning too. And that will show up on tests and papers in some ways. In some ways it won't, but that's really the important part of the learning, is you're taking responsibility for it. And so I guess that's maybe a challenge I'm trying to give to all my students, is to realize we're working hard to structure class time well, to set up good assignments, pick good readings, but a lot of this does fall on you. And that's hard. And so know that this is why we give you a small group leader, and why we have undergraduate TAs, people you can go to, because it is difficult, it is a challenge, and we do want to support you. So please don't hesitate to ask for help, to bring questions to us. This is what we're here for, honestly. Sam, I'll turn the question back to you. I just kind of monopolized airtime there for a while, but as someone who not only has taught CWC for a long time, but also works in the Academic Enrichment and Support Center, what advice do you have for students, given what I just said?
I would say the other piece of this is sort of the opposite of what we're saying, which is we keep talking about how different this is going to be, how new this is going to be. At the same time, you're people who've been in school for 12, 13 years. You have a lot of muscle memory of what it looks like to be a student. You have a lot of experience. And I would say lean on those things. Think about the things that have worked well for you to study and to learn, and do those things here. And if you have questions, or you run into things where those things aren't working, that's where I would also say, tap into some of those resources. But don't forget, just because this might look a little bit different than other courses you've had, this is still just a continuation of the kind of hard work you've been doing.
Okay, that's our introduction to CWC. And of course, you'll learn more about all of this on the first day of class, whether you're sitting in the underground or watching it on a computer somewhere later in the day. When we come back, we're going to do our version of starting to introduce members of our faculty team, and also a few of the key figures you're going to meet over the 3 units of CWC. Back after a break. Okay, welcome back to the second segment of this first webisode in CWC. By the way, we should say we're going to plan to do these twice a unit. So CWC is broken up into 3 units with a test at the end of each one. Each one covers a chunk of time. So the first one covers roughly 1,000 years, so ancient Greece through the early church. And so what we'll do is in the middle of each unit, and then right before the test in each unit, we'll do a webisode. Sam and I will be here. We'll probably rotate through a few other faculty. So partly this will serve to help you review, and especially think about some of the key figures in the class and why they're significant. And so one of the things we'll try to do to keep things a little bit light, knowing how heavy a lot of CWC can be, is we like to play games in the second segment of these webisodes. And we like to play a game that we just call, because we're not creative, Heads on Sticks. So what we're going to do is we're each going to play the role of a certain person related to CWC and answer a question. And there's kind of one question here. Sometimes we'll have a mix of questions. The one question here is, who is in your cloud of witnesses? Sam, you're going to say more about this on day 1 in the class. Do you want to give a quick preview of the devotion that students are going to hear from you? What's the cloud of witnesses?
Absolutely. The theme verse for CWC is Hebrews 11 through 12:1, which is the sort of story of the faith through the Old Testament. So the author is naming all these people who live by faith. And it ends with this image, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, this idea that all of the people of faith who have come before us are now literally in this cloud of witnesses looking down on us as we continue to run the race that they began. And this image of the cloud of witnesses ties into what we're going to be doing in CWC, because it's part of this course is about expanding your cloud of witnesses. We want to teach you about more people who are part of that stream of the history of the faith that you find yourself standing in right now. So this cloud of witnesses idea is one of the things that we try to do as we go through this course.
Okay, so we're each going to play 3 different roles, and for each of these people we're playing, we're going to talk about someone in their cloud of witnesses. So Sam, who am I?
You are Bethel philosopher Sarah Shady.
Huh.
Sarah, who is in your cloud of witnesses?
Well, thanks for having me on. I wish I could be here live, but instead I'll do it this way. Sam, as you said, I'm a philosopher. I've taught philosophy at Bethel since 2002, and I've been part of the CWC team pretty much the whole way. And so you'll often see me in a lecture that says something philosophy. So the second week of class, I'll be there to talk about ancient philosophy and to introduce what it is that philosophy is as a discipline, the kind of questions that we ask, whether it's something about the nature of knowledge, epistemology, or the nature of behavior and living, ethics, or metaphysics. We'll be talking about philosophy. And philosophy, the name comes from Greek, the love of wisdom, the love of Sophia. And so the Greeks play a really important role in my discipline. And it's really exciting to get to introduce students to people like Socrates, the great teacher in 5th century Athens, and then to his student Plato, who in many ways is everything else in Western philosophy is kind of a footnote to Plato. But I'm especially particular to one of Plato's students, a philosopher named Aristotle, who lives in the 4th century, actually ends up being a tutor of Alexander the Great, a key political figure we'll meet. And we're going to learn a lot about different views that Aristotle has. He famously has a big debate with his teacher Plato about where we find knowledge, where we find truth. And Aristotle, in many ways, is kind of helping move us towards something like a scientific method, to say that empiricism, observation, experimentation, analysis, and cataloging of what's here on Earth is important. I especially find Aristotle important because he also writes works about ethics. Which is something I sometimes teach in the philosophy department. And he thinks that a life well lived is one of virtue. It's one in which you're cultivating characteristics like moderation and prudence and justice. And Aristotle thinks that we're not born with these. We're kind of blank slates, and we have to decide to cultivate them. And that's influenced by everything from our teachers and our friends and our environment, but it also has to do with behaviors. Like we can actually decide to become wiser, more just, more courageous. So just stay tuned for that. If you're lucky, you might hear a story from me, kind of an Aristotelian parable about dogs and my fear of dogs. But we'll talk about how Aristotle thinks we become virtuous. Okay.
All right, Chris, who am I?
Well, Sam, you are also a CWC professor, ironically enough. You are Amy Poppinga of the history department. Who's in your cloud of witnesses?
There's so many people that I could put in my cloud of witnesses. I'm inclined to want to talk about the 18th century church reformer John Wesley, but I think one of my favorite people to talk about in this course, to teach about in this course, is the 16th century nun Teresa of Avila. So why am I drawn to Teresa? Well, she's somebody who is really significant, in part because she is a woman who, at a time when there isn't a lot of roles for women in positions of authority, positions of power in life in the church, really rises to a really important position. Teresa is also a mystic. So she's significant because she has these mystical experiences where God is actually like talking to her, giving her these visions. And this really transforms her life. So she writes a lot about sort of the power, the transformative power of faith. She uses this metaphor of a silkworm becoming a butterfly, and that's like the Christian needing to sort of die to this world and being reborn in Christ. And then she's somebody who takes that idea of spiritual rebirth, takes her faith really seriously, and uses that to push for changes and reforms in her religious order, and encourages others to not just sort of kind of absorb the faith around them, but to really take it seriously and to live that out and act that out. And she becomes a monastic leader and just a really significant person to the history of the church and to the history of shaping the church in the 16th century. So that's who I'm going to include in my cloud of witnesses.
Sounds great. Okay, Sam, who am I now?
You are Bethel theologian Jim Bilby.
That's right. I am a theologian, and this is not a theology class. You'll be taking Christian theo with me later on. You'll really dive into things like salvation and sin and the end times and all that. But we do get to introduce you a little bit to theology here. And you're going to meet some of the great theologians in church history. You're going to meet people like Thomas Aquinas and John Calvin and John Wesley. But first of all, you're going to meet a North African theologian from around 400 AD named Augustine. Now, Garrett's is going to tell you it's Augustine, but it's Augustine. That's the proper pronunciation. And I like Augustine for a lot of reasons. I think he has really helped me and many other people think through a lot of questions. He's been significant in the Catholic tradition for his doctrine of the church and the sacraments. He's important to the Protestant Reformation because people like John Calvin and before him Martin Luther will recover what Augustine thinks about the nature of original sin and the idea of God saving us by grace alone. But Augustine really resonates with me because of his story. Like Augustine, his mother was a Christian, but his father was not. He didn't grow up as a Christian, and he really strayed. He had a difficult kind of upbringing, really wrestled with how he was supposed to live, what he was supposed to do, and what to believe about God and the good life. And that was kind of my experience. You know, I grew up in a Christian home. I went to a Christian college, but I lost my faith for a time. And it was to a large extent because of something that Augustine wrestled with called the problem of evil. You know, Christians say that there's this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-just, all-good God, and yet evil exists. War exists, natural disasters and pandemics happen. People die of cancer. Why does God allow that? And so kind of reading Augustine wrestle with that helped me wrestle with that. And I think that's really what's one of the powerful things about CWC is that as we meet this cloud of witnesses, we kind of realize they're like us, even if they lived 1,600 years and thousands of miles ago and thousands of miles away. They're, you know, there's some universal questions here we're asking, and this is a helpful figure if we listen to Augustine. So I'm excited to talk about him more in a lecture in a few weeks. Okay, Sam.
All right, Chris, who am I?
You look like Dan Yim, also of the Bethel Philosophy Department and CWC.
So who I'm going to include in my cloud of witnesses is the 17th century philosopher Rene Descartes. One of the things you'll learn about me is I don't just love philosophy and I don't just love asking questions, but I love asking the kind of questions that really make people not just think, but make people question the foundations of what they believe and what they understand. I take some joy in tearing those foundations up, and that's exactly what Descartes does. Descartes, living in the 1600s, really wants to tear apart even the foundations of religion, not because he disagrees with it, but because he wants to make it better. He wants to build a kind of rational foundation so that faith can be communicated in the marketplace of ideas. So he wants to take apart anything that he can doubt and then build up a rational foundation for understanding the immortality of the soul and understanding the existence of God. So he's somebody that I love to teach about because I think he's somebody that where I'm cut from a similar cloth than him. I like to not just accept answers as they are, but I like to sort of dig deeper and think about what lies behind the answers that we give to questions.
All right, who am I, Sam? This is my last one.
You are Sam Mulberry.
It's like looking in a mirror. Well, it's funny you're talking about 17th century French thinkers in the midst of the scientific revolution, because a key figure in my cloud of witnesses is another French thinker of that time, a contemporary of Descartes named Blaise Pascal. Now, I'm always drawn to Pascal for a few reasons. One is he's a good model of a liberally educated, broadly thinking person. He's best known for his work in mathematics. He's a father of computer science, which is what I came to Bethel originally to study. But Pascal also spends a lot of time thinking about philosophy and even theology. And so in a sense, like, even if you're here to study STEM, if you're here to be an engineer or pre-med or to study one of the sciences or math, like, you can be someone like Pascal. So that's a challenge I think we want to give you in CWC. But the other reason I like Pascal is because he disagrees with Descartes. You know, he thinks that Christianity in the age of reason, as they start to call it, does need to be reasonable. It can't just be seen as superstitious and backwards and mysterious. It needs to be able to address the challenge of science and rationalism. But it can't just do that. We can't strip away the mystery of the faith. You know, there's a way that God reveals himself to us through mystics like Teresa of Avila. And especially, Pascal is concerned that if we just make Christianity a reasonable religion, you know, for the sake of this marketplace of ideas, we're going to lose a different way of knowing God. That faith is known through the heart, maybe more than through the head. And that if all we have is a reasonable religion, what will become known as deism, we're also missing the fact that we are corrupted by sin. I've been influenced by Augustine in this way. And we need a mediator, we need a redeemer, we need a savior, we need Jesus and relationship with him. And so I jotted some of these thoughts down before I died at a young age. And you've got a few of those thoughts in your reading packet. I'm sorry, I'm actually not playing Pascal, I'm playing Sam Mulberry, who thinks that you should read Pascal's thoughts or pensées, and is excited to teach them to a small group. Okay.
They just kind of blend together, though.
It's a complicated role. This is very meta, what we're doing here.
That's right. And finally, who am I?
Surprise. You're an unbearded Chris Garrett.
That's right. And the person that I'm going to put in my cloud of witnesses is another 17th century thinker, and that is Philip Spener.
Kind of stuck in a
Spener,
rut here in the 17th century.
That's right. Well, we could tell it's an important century. Spener is a foundational thinker for Bethel. So in your first few weeks at Bethel, you'll probably hear, even during Welcome Week, you'll probably hear people talk about pietism. Well, pietism has its roots in the life and work of Philip Spener. So Spener thought that Christians should focus on Scripture, sort of studying the Bible in small group as a guide to not just theology, but how to live your life. And that's the big idea for Spener that really resonates with me, is this idea that faith exists in action, not just in your thoughts and ideas and beliefs. If faith is only the stuff that we believe, but it doesn't impact who we are and how we live, then that faith might be orthodox, but it's a kind of dead orthodoxy. So that's a really crucial idea for me, and it's really become central to, since I've come to Bethel, to the research that I do to the books that I write. So I've written a number of books on pietism. It's pretty central to me, and it's foundational. Understanding pietism will help you understand. It'll help you understand your experience here at Bethel, because that is the roots of Bethel's religious tradition. So, Chris, I will now join you on screen.
Yeah.
You want to? All right.
Spener sounds like a great guy.
So
if students are interested, you can pick these up. That's the last time I'll do that. All right, that's how we do the second segment. We'll play Heads on Sticks at least once more, I'm sure. We'll play another game we like called Food Chain, where we'll talk more about key figures from each unit. But hopefully that's helpful to you, this week, to start to get to know the people of the course, living and dead. But also to set up what we're going to do as webisodes go on. Okay, we'll be right back to wrap things up on this introductory webisode for CWC of fall 2020. All right, folks, we always like to end on a happy note, so it's happy time. Happy birthday to Rupert Grint. Ron Weasley turns 32 today. Sam, which is the best Harry Potter movie?
This is actually really tough for me to say, because you're always safe, I think, if you say number 3. I think lots of people like The Prisoner of Azkaban. It's an unpopular opinion, but I actually really like the first movie. I know, but secretly, my favorite Harry Potter movie is the first Fantastic Beasts movie, but that I really don't want to say publicly. And in truth, I think the best part of the whole Harry Potter sequence of movies is the tale of the 3 brothers from the 6th movie. I could watch stories told like that for like 10 hours straight. So to me, I will say that part of the 6th movie is my favorite Harry Potter movie.
I have 10-year-old twins, and not surprisingly, they love Harry Potter. We are currently in the 4th time, like literally as of last night, in the 4th time since COVID started of watching our way through the series. And we just watched the Fantastic Beasts last week. So I'm actually on board with you, except for the first movie thing. We'll talk about that
off air. Happy anniversary to Amelia Earhart, who this day in 1932 became the first woman to fly across the USA without stopping. Chris, is there anything you want to tell us about the history of aviation from the work you've been doing this summer?
Oh gosh, I've already been shilling for a couple of my books. I don't feel comfortable saying anymore, but I have spent the summer writing a new book. It's a spiritual biography of Minnesota's own Charles Lindbergh. So actually, my other thing I'm doing today is working on revisions to that manuscript. So in 9 to 12 months, I can hold that book up, and you can all go rush by that book instead. All right, happy trails to the Roman Empire, at least in Western Europe. On this day in the year 410, a group called the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome, hastening the decline of the Roman Empire in Western Europe and prompting our friend Augustine to write The City of God, which you'll read a piece of later on, students. Sam, let me ask you a question. One of our colleagues asked me my first semester teaching CWC, how much longer before the United States goes the way of the Roman Empire?
Come on, man. Like, how could they just met me and now you're asking me that question? Your colleague may have asked you that, but they didn't ask you that in front of all of the students, I don't think.
There are no softballs on this program.
Yeah, so, it's a really loaded question, but we're living in dark times, so I want to be all positivity. I'm just going to tell you everything's going to be okay. And here's the great thing. Let's say everything's not okay. This course is going to introduce you to, as you mentioned, Augustine of Hippo and City of God. So we're going to prepare you to think about if things go real bad. So either way, you're covered.
Yeah, that's a month away. Don't worry. It'll be great for at least a month, and then we'll tear everything down. And Sam, as a historian, you can always say, I don't. My job's not to predict the future. That's an acceptable.
Oh, I'll write that one down. That's good.
Okay. Any last thoughts for students?
Remember that classes start on August 31st, on Monday, August 31st. But not all of you will be coming to class. We'll send you an email about this, but just so you know, students who are in Berglund small groups should attend the 9 a.m. lecture in the underground on Monday, August 31st. If you're in Mulberry small groups, so my small groups, we're going to be watching that first lecture online. Students who are in the Bilby or Shady small groups should attend lecture at 11:10 in the underground on August 31st. Students who are in Poppinga or Gert small groups should be watching the lecture online. If you're in a Hague or Darling small group, you should be watching the lectures online. It's my job to put those lectures together. My goal is to have them posted by 4 p.m. every day that we have lectures.
All right, and again, we'll send you an email. We'll create kind of groups within Moodle so we can communicate directly with our group. So we'll tell you again where you're supposed to go. I know the first day of the first week is super complicated and frenetic, but we'll get everyone in the right place. So we enjoy doing these. We actually do these every summer for a fully online version of the class. So if you can tell, we like to have fun with this. We're looking forward to doing more of them as the semester goes along. Sam, why don't you take us out?
Well, I hope that the the waning days of summer break go well, and this is going to be a great semester no matter what it looks like. So for all of us on the CWC team, we can't wait to finally get to work with you, finally get to meet you, and say goodnight, Stacy.